So we're on task 3.3, so third diamond, as you can see, and this is looking at a bank balance. I'm going to decide two cases, if it's in the red or in the black. It's in the black if the number of dollars is 0 or positive, so 0 or above. So in this case it's 50, so we say in the black. But if we put in -1, then we should say in the red. And just to remind you that your code should produce everything that's blue, but the black is what's input by the user at runtime. So we shouldn't see 50 in your code over here. That's what you're going to type in down here when you've run. So let's have a look at the previous circle page, because that gives you all the information that you need. So we'll zoom in. We're just going to look at the bottom section down here. So this was, we'll run the code and then I'll pause the video in a second. So at this point here now, let's just go through the little bits that we've got. So the code has produced this, how many centimeters tall are you, and it's done that because exactly the same words are there and you've used an input. So when the input happens, we print out whatever's in the green there, and then the code waits for us to type in a value. So that's been typed in. That's not in any of the code that you can see up here, this 158. The other thing we've used on this, because we're expecting a number, is integer. And the important thing to remember is when you've got integer and input, you've got two functions, so therefore you should have two brackets on the end. So sometimes you'll get a syntax error, and it's because you're missing a bracket. So that first line, the other thing to notice is that we have a variable to store whatever's been input. So this 158 will now be stored in the variable called height. And on the next line we're doing an if, which is checking what value is stored in height to see if it's actually equal. And there are two equal signs when we're doing a comparison. If it's actually equal with the value 157. The other important thing about an if is it has a full-on colon at the end of the line there. So if height is equal to 157, it's going to print that line. But we've put 158, which means it isn't. So it does that check and says, no, that's false, skips the next line, and goes to the else and says, okay, you are not the same height. And that's what it's printed at that point there. So let's make a little change to the code. I'll run the video on. Let's make a little change to the code around this area here. Instead of saying, is it equal to, because in yours, you're saying, is the number, you're saying, is it positive, 0 or positive? So that's different than being equal to. So you're going to have a slight difference. So what we're doing on this one, and again, I'll pause the video in a second, is that we're looking at changing the comparison from an equals into a greater than sign. So if I pause the video there, we can have a look at that. There now, where we had equals equals, we've now got is height greater than 157. I've changed the words so it makes sense. If it is greater, you are taller than Kylie, else you are smaller. So again, we've got height equals how many centimeters tall are you. We've put in 150, so that's stored in height. So now when it does the next line and says if height is greater than 157, well, 150 isn't, it would do that, so it's not going to, it skips to else, and it's going to print you are smaller than Kylie Minogue. Okay, so the reason for doing that is because your task asks you for something specific. We're going to add an extra little thing on here again, and that's because your task is asking for something a little bit more specific. So let's just pause that video there. If we have a look here now, you're looking for a positive number which includes 0 to be input at this point. Okay, so now if you look at this, this is how many centimeters tall are you, that puts that there. Yours should say number, so you're going to need to change that so that it looks exactly like that, and there is a space, like there is a space there. If it is 50, you're going to say in the black, so that's, if it's true, you're going to have to replace that line with in the black. If it isn't true, this is the other option down here, -1 in the red, so that's this line here. So the structure for this is very similar to this, and as I say, we've put greater than or equal to 157. Now you're looking for 0 or above, so you can probably work out what it is you're going to need to do to make the changes to complete task 3.3.